My dear friend, is not a punishment, it is a sanctuary, and those who run from it run from themselves. You see, when a man learns to be alone, truly alone, not lonely, but at peace in his own company, he becomes untouchable. Not by arrogance, but by self-possession. The man who walks through life with no entourage, no crowd, no audience clapping for every step. He walks in truth. I have met many people in this world, some brilliant, some deceptive, some sincere, others parasites of emotion. But the ones I've admired most were the quiet ones, the ones who didn't need to announce their every move, their every thought, the ones who spoke less and listened more. Their power came not from volume, but from presence. They had few friends, if any, and yet they walked taller than kings. A man who chooses a small circle, or no circle at all, he does not fear abandonment. Why? Because he has already embraced the silence. He has made peace with it. He is not waiting to be rescued from himself. He is already home. Such a man is not cold. He is clear. He is not bitter. He is boundaried. The world does not define him. He defines the world he lets in. We live in an age of noise, constant shallow noise. Friends are measured in likes. Trust is exchanged for attention, and worth is mistaken for validation. But the secure man, he is invisible in these games. You won't find him begging for company. He's too busy in the garden of his own mind, tending to deeper things. He surrounds himself not with applause, but with integrity, and yes, people will call him distant. Cold, aloof, they will say he is too selective, but that is the cost of peace. He does not waste time proving himself. He does not chase people. If they misunderstand him, so be it. He does not explain. He is not building a fan club. He is building a life, quietly, unapologetically. I have seen men with dozens of companions, yet no peace, surrounded by people, yet utterly alone inside. And I have seen others, one or two true allies, or even just themselves, and they radiated something solid, something grounded. It's not about how many people love you, my friend. It's about how deeply you love yourself when no one is watching. To the man walking alone, do not fear your path. Do not let them make you feel like something is missing. You are not lacking. You are refining. You are filtering out the noise to hear the sacred whisper of your own being. This world has enough followers. What it needs are men who are whole without an audience. The man who walks alone is not antisocial. He is anti-frivolity. He is not shy. He is selective. He is not weak. He is composed because the stronger the tree, the deeper the roots, and the deeper the roots, the less it needs a forest to stand tall. Don't be afraid to walk away from noise, from fake smiles, from obligatory handshakes. If you ever wonder why you don't fit in, perhaps it's because you weren't meant to blend. You were meant to build something different, in silence, in solitude, in strength. So yes, a man with no friends or a very small circle is a very secure man. Not because he is better, but because he has chosen depth over decoration, stillness over spectacle, and truth over popularity. And if that makes him different, good, because different is where greatness begins. Noise is not nourishment. Constant social interaction doesn't equate to meaningful connection. Silence often speaks louder than shallow companionship. A man who walks in solitude is not escaping the world. He is choosing to know it first through himself. And that knowledge of self, once acquired, cannot be stripped away by any crowd, any rejection, or any storm. He does not need applause to confirm his step. The very act of walking alone affirms that he knows where he is going. You must understand, true solitude is not a condition of physical loneliness. It is a spiritual act. It is standing in the mirror of the universe and saying, I see you. And when you finally do see yourself, without the performance, without the masks, you begin to realize how secure you truly are. Most men never get there. They are too busy chasing connection like it's a commodity. Friendship becomes a transaction. Presence becomes a product. They collect people like trophies and wonder why they still feel empty. The man of solitude, however, requires none of that. He is already full. There is no performance in solitude. You can't lie to yourself in that space, not for long. And if you can survive what you find there, your fears, your past, your naked thoughts, then you come out of it unbreakable. Because no one else's judgment can rival your own. A man secure in solitude doesn't crave attention. He knows attention is temporary. He knows it is a flickering candle in the wind. What he seeks is understanding. Understanding of life, of purpose, of stillness. And such understanding doesn't come from noise. It comes from quiet spaces where thoughts are uninterrupted. The world calls this man strange. It calls him cold, distant, even arrogant. But what they really mean is, he doesn't need us. And that frightens them, because most people cannot imagine living without the constant validation of others. Yet he does, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Solitude becomes a shield, not to hide behind, but to protect the truth within. When a man walks alone, he becomes more aware of what he gives his time to. Conversations are no longer casual, they are sacred. Relationships are no longer taken for granted, they are examined. In solitude, time moves differently. The hours are not devoured by obligation. Instead, they become space for thought, for creation, for transformation. And when a man uses his time like this, he is no longer at the mercy of the world's schedule. He becomes the architect of his own. The secure man doesn't explain his solitude. He doesn't defend it. He doesn't try to convert others to understand it. He simply lives it, and in that choice there is a quiet power that draws attention, not because he asks for it, but because real power does not announce itself. Solitude reveals what is real. It strips away the unnecessary. When you sit long enough in your own company, you begin to understand what you truly value, and once you identify what is essential, you stop giving energy to the inessential. That is where strength begins. A man who knows himself is not desperate for company. He can enjoy it, yes, but he does not depend on it. That distinction is everything, because when you don't need people to fill your silence, you relate to them differently. Not from hunger, but from peace. His conversations are fewer, but deeper. His relationships are smaller, but stronger. He doesn't spread himself thin for the sake of appearances. He invests inward before he ever extends outward. And that is why his presence feels grounded, because it is. There are storms he does not fear, losses he does not mourn the same, betrayals that do not break him, because he has already met all of these in solitude. He has wrestled with his shadows and come out the other side, alone, but not broken, still, but not stuck, and so he walks, not in arrogance, not in isolation, but in awareness. He walks with calm steps, deliberate movements, and an internal compass that does not flicker based on public opinion. This is what solitude offers, not loneliness, not weakness, but security. Shall I proceed with selective company is a sign of strength in the same expanded style. Not all company is good company. There comes a moment in a man's life when he stops trying to keep everyone. He stops adjusting himself to fit in places he's outgrown, stops laughing at conversations that leave him empty, stops offering explanations for his solitude. He no longer feels the need to belong where he does not feel truth. That moment, subtle as it may appear, marks the birth of inner strength, the kind that does not depend on approval but clarity. To be selective is not to be cold, it is to value your energy as sacred. When a man learns to guard his peace, he does not cast wide nets to catch acquaintances. He casts carefully, he lets fewer in, not because he is better than others, but because he finally understands the cost of unguarded presence. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your inner world. Some come with hunger, not for connection, but for distraction. Others arrive with noise, not dialogue. A man who has suffered through false friendships begins to cherish silence over shallow loyalty. He becomes patient with solitude and cautious with entry. The circle gets smaller, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. He no longer mistakes loudness for love. He has learned that some of the quietest people offer the deepest companionship, and that the loudest rooms often carry the emptiest souls. The less he demands from others, the more clearly he sees their motives. There is a great lie in society that tells us more is better, More friends, more conversations, more connections, but a man of discernment knows the truth. More can often mean diluted, scattered, fragmented. He does not chase numbers, he chases meaning, and meaning rarely travels in crowds. He would rather have one honest soul walking beside him than 1,000 shadows cheering from a distance, depth over width every time. When you are selective, you start to notice things that others overlook. You feel the tone behind the words. You sense the motive behind the kindness. You become aware of who truly listens and who simply waits to speak. That awareness becomes your protection. It keeps you from falling into the traps of performance-based relationships. You no longer need to prove your worth through constant giving. You give when you choose, not when you're pressured. There is no virtue in being constantly available to people who leave you feeling less than whole. A strong man does not feel guilty for protecting his energy. He does not apologize for leaving conversations that exhaust him or walking away from rooms where truth has no place. He is not rude, he is rooted, he is not cruel, he is clear, and that clarity is hard, won through years of mistaking attention for affection, noise for loyalty, and quantity for quality. You cannot keep growing while constantly explaining yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Selectivity becomes a form of liberation. It is the quiet recognition that not everyone is meant to go where you are headed. Some people are chapters, others are anchors, and then there are those rare few who are mirrors, calm, unwavering, and necessary. The man who learns to distinguish between them becomes unshakable. Selective company teaches you to listen differently. You stop listening for entertainment and start listening for alignment. You don't need everyone to agree with you, but you crave honesty, presence, and substance. You are drawn not to the people who flatter you, but to those who challenge you without wounding you, who hold space for your silence, who understand your pauses. As a man grows more selective, he starts choosing silence over argument, purpose over popularity, and essence over appearance. His circle may appear invisible to outsiders, but to him it is a sanctuary. He no longer competes for relevance. He has found it within. The applause of the crowd no longer stirs him. What matters is the stillness of knowing he belongs where he stands. When you become selective, your time becomes sacred. You stop rushing to fill every hour with interaction. You stop fearing empty calendars. You begin to trust the seasons of stillness. The friendships that remain or emerge during those quiet seasons are the ones that grow deep roots. They are not built on convenience, but on resonance. You don't need to speak every day. The bond lives beyond words. Not everyone will understand your selectiveness. Some will accuse you of being distant, selfish, even arrogant. But what they don't see is the cost you once paid to be constantly available. They don't see the toll it took on your peace, the dilution of your focus, the erosion of your identity in the name of connection. They don't understand that your distance is not absence, but intention. The strong man does not walk away from people with malice in his heart. He simply stops placing himself in spaces where he must shrink to be accepted. He releases what does not serve his growth. He no longer waters relationships that wither when he is honest. He does not chase, he observes, and in that stillness his power becomes unmistakable. There are people who will say you've changed, and you will smile quietly because they are right. You have stopped giving away your presence to those who could not hold it. You have learned to walk away without slamming doors. You have stopped trying to fix what was never yours to repair. You have become a curator of your world, not a doorman. To choose quality over quantity is to reclaim your life. To be selective is not to shut out the world. The world is louder than it has ever been. Everyone is speaking, but few are listening. Everyone is broadcasting, but no one is truly connecting. And in the chaos of voices competing for attention, a man can forget that stillness is not emptiness. That silence is not lack. that the absence of noise is often where the truth begins to whisper. Noise is seductive. It gives the illusion of life, of momentum, of movement, of importance. But what it often disguises is distraction. Just because something demands your attention doesn't mean it deserves it. Just because everyone is talking doesn't mean they have something to say. A man who grows tired of noise is not bitter. He is becoming wise. There is a nourishment that cannot be found in conversation, music, media, or movement. It is found in silence, the quiet between breaths, the hush that falls when the phone is off, the room is still, and the only voice remaining is your own. That is not loneliness, that is clarity, and most people have never tasted it, so they fear it. People fill their lives with noise to avoid meeting themselves. They keep their schedules packed, their screens lit, their ears busy. Because silence holds a mirror to the soul, and what you see there, if you are not ready, can be unsettling, so they run from themselves, from their memories, from the questions they've buried beneath years of volume. But a man who stops running, who sits in that silence and listens, truly listens, will begin to uncover something rare, an inner voice that doesn't shout, doesn't beg, but simply speaks truth, not the truth you show others. Not the one wrapped in performance, but the truth that can't be dressed up, the one you've carried all your life beneath the noise. He begins to realize that silence is not a punishment, it is a teacher. And it teaches slowly, it doesn't rush, it doesn't dazzle, it simply reveals, bit by bit, like fog lifting from a quiet field at dawn. It shows him the pieces of himself he abandoned, the questions he never asked, the parts he needs to reclaim. Noise cannot feed the soul, it can stimulate, it can entertain, but it cannot nourish. Like candy to the body, it offers a brief rush, a temporary high, and then a crash. But the quiet things, the slow thoughts, the unspoken reflections, these are the roots. And a man without roots will always feel restless, no matter how many people surround him. In silence, the man finds his edge. He sharpens not his image, but his awareness. He begins to notice the subtle signals, the way his body responds to stress, the way his mind spins in uncertainty, the way his spirit yearns for rest. These realizations do not arrive in noise. They arrive in listening. And listening cannot happen when everything is screaming. The man begins to withdraw, not out of anger, not out of superiority, but out of reverence. He no longer walks into rooms out of habit. He no longer consumes noise out of boredom. He becomes intentional. He chooses his input as he would choose his food, carefully, consciously. He no longer allows his mind to be a landfill of other people's noise. The secure man sees through the illusion that noise equals success. He sees men who shout about wealth but are poor in peace. He sees those who gather crowds but live in chaos. He sees performers who never take off the mask, even in front of themselves, and he feels no envy. He would rather be quiet and clear than loud and lost. There is something deeply powerful about a man who doesn't need to respond, who hears the chaos and remains centered, who is not drawn into every argument, every trend, every conversation. This man has not grown passive. He has grown rooted. He no longer chases after surface approval. He guards his inner world like a sacred garden, and he starts to hunger differently. He no longer craves stimulation. He craves substance. He longs for quiet mornings, deep conversations, slow thoughts. He finds that books feed him more than gossip, that walks in nature repair more than applause, that listening to his own breath teaches more than 100 podcasts. He returns to what is real. The irony is, once you embrace silence, you begin to hear more. You hear what's beneath people's words. You sense when someone is hiding behind a smile. You know when someone is avoiding their own reflection. Silence sharpens you. It doesn't make you dull. It makes you precise. You see the noise for what it is, a veil, a distraction, a performance. Most people don't realize how loud the world is until they leave it. Until they sit still long enough to feel the ache in their own chest, the unresolved, the unspoken, the unhealed, silence makes space for that pain to surface, and in that space healing begins, not through words, not through noise, but through presence, quiet, unwavering presence. There is something profoundly misunderstood about solitude. To many it feels like exile, a punishment, a signal that something has gone wrong. But to those who have journeyed inward, being alone is not exile, it is excavation. It is the quiet descent into the deeper chambers of the soul, where the surface gives way to substance. The man who learns to be alone is not deprived, he is refined. He has chosen to swim beneath the chatter, beneath the obligations, beneath the need for applause. He is no longer afraid of the echo, he welcomes it. He knows that the echo carries answers. It reverberates with parts of himself he once buried beneath the noise of approval and performance. There is no depth without descent. You cannot touch the ocean floor from the surface. You must dive. You must accept the pressure, the darkness, the distance from the familiar. The man who walks into aloneness without panic discovers a world untouched by comparison. There is no mirror but the truth, and the truth, when unmasked, becomes a compass. Most men are surrounded and yet unknown. They build a persona that suits the company they keep, they blend, they perform. They avoid silence not because it bores them, but because it exposes them. The man who chooses solitude does so because he is no longer willing to live in costume. He does not fear being unseen. He fears being unreal. Solitude peels away layers. It strips the man of his conveniences, his crutches, his distractions, his need to be needed. It places him in a room with his regrets and triumphs, his shadows and aspirations. There he meets himself not as a stranger, but as the only one who will remain when everything else fades. Depth is not forged in gatherings. It is not granted through popularity. It is sculpted in the dark. In the moments between moments, in the long pauses between decisions, a man in solitude begins to hear the rhythm of his own life, a rhythm too subtle to dance to in public, but too sacred to ignore in silence. He notices what triggers his anxiety, what patterns repeat, what dreams persist even when the world stops watching. He no longer reacts, he observes. He no longer reaches outward for validation. He reaches inward for understanding. His questions change. He no longer asks, "What do they think of me?" He asks, "What do I know of myself?" The man who embraces solitude grows his roots downward, not outward. His strength is no longer in how many people he can impress, but how many truths he can endure. Alone, he learns patience, not forced patience, but chosen stillness. He learns to wait for answers without agitation, to breathe without background music, to sit without fleeing. In the world, everyone is chasing more. More friends, more followers, more affection, but in solitude the man begins to desire less, but of greater quality, less noise, but deeper meaning, fewer faces, but richer connection, less motion, but more purpose. The hunger that once drove him externally now pulls him toward internal clarity. He sees that most people are not truly alive. They are merely connected, tethered to opinions, addicted to affirmation. He sees that being alone is not about isolation, but about integration. It is the merging of all the fragmented parts of self, once scattered across relationships, achievements, and roles. In solitude, he gathers himself. There is no mask in the quiet, there is no performance. The mirror becomes less forgiving but more accurate, and it is this accuracy that births real transformation. The man who accepts what he sees in solitude no longer builds illusions, he builds foundations. His growth is no longer cosmetic, it is structural. Alone, he confronts his wounds, not to indulge them, but to understand them. He traces them back to moments, to decisions, to lies he once believed. He begins to rewrite those lies, slowly, deliberately. He no longer hides from his history. He walks through it with new eyes. He becomes his own witness, his own healer. He begins to treasure time differently. not as something to kill or spend, but something to befriend. He learns the power of pacing, of presence, of pacing himself according to his own breath, not the rush of the crowd. His life becomes less frantic, more deliberate. He no longer needs the clock to validate his day. There is a strange richness to a man who has been alone and not been broken by it. He carries a calm that cannot be bought, a strength that doesn't shout. He has met the deepest version of himself and did not retreat. He walked through his own corridors of doubt and emerged with something unshakable. There is a quiet intelligence in those who keep their circles small, not because they cannot attract a crowd, but because they have no appetite for the shallow tide of casual connection. Their soul demands something denser, something rooted. They are not impressed by applause. They are moved by presence, a different currency altogether. The man who limits his circle is not hiding, he is protecting. There are parts of the soul that do not belong in the marketplace. Not every thought is meant for sharing, not every joy for display. Some truths are sacred, and sacred things, when placed in too many hands, lose their shape. A small circle acts as a boundary against dilution. Big souls do not broadcast their depth. They don't advertise their wisdom. They carry it quietly, like an old coat worn in winter, not to be seen but to be felt. And when they speak, it is not to impress but to reveal. Their voice doesn't chase attention. It waits for silence, and when it comes, it fills it completely. To build a small circle, one must choose discomfort. You must be willing to walk away from quantity. You must say no to invitations that flatter the ego but starve the spirit. It is not loneliness, it is selection. A man who selects his company as carefully as his thoughts is not lonely. He is awake. He knows that energy is not infinite, that conversations cost something, that even listening takes a toll, and so he spends his presence as one would spend inheritance, carefully, without waste. He no longer attends every gathering, he no longer answers every call. He is not rude, he is refined. There is something magnetic about such a man, not loud, not boastful, but unmistakably solid. Others may not understand why they are drawn to him. But it is the silence in him that speaks loudest. It is the way he listens, without interruption, the way he sees, without judgment, the way he exists, without needing to explain. In a world where everyone wants to be known, the secure man values being understood. And he knows understanding requires time, trust, and truth. These are not things one finds in crowds. These are treasures unearthed in stillness, in repetition, in loyalty. And so he surrounds himself with few, but those few see all of him. He doesn't crave constant interaction. He craves honest connection. He seeks those who ask not, "What do you do?" but "How are you, really?" He is drawn not to people who talk much, but to those who think deeply. His circle is not based on mutual benefit, but on mutual depth, and in that space his soul breathes. He understands that some relationships shrink the spirit, that being surrounded can sometimes feel lonelier than being alone, that some smiles are sharp, and some company suffocates. And so he edits, gently, without bitterness. He lets go of noise disguised as friendship. He walks away from warmth that burns. This small circle becomes a sanctuary, a place where masks are not required, where silence is allowed to sit at the table, where words are not wasted and presence is the gift. Here the man does not perform, he is received, he is challenged but never diminished. In this circle he grows inwardly, and with time he realizes he doesn't need many to walk far. He only needs a few who walk true. He doesn't need voices to echo his own. He needs voices that steady his vision, even when he wavers. He doesn't need company that fills the room. He needs company that fills the soul. In solitude he found his shape. In his small circle he finds reflection. Each person a mirror, not of vanity, but of truth. They do not flatter him. They sharpen him. They do not praise him endlessly. They see him fully. and in being seen without performance, he becomes more himself than ever before. He watches the world clamor for bigger networks, more followers, louder laughter, and he remains still. He knows that crowds may applaud your highs, but few remain when you descend. A small circle, though, walks with you into the dark, holds the silence with you, and waits until the light returns. That is wealth. The secure man no longer asks how many people like him. He asks how many truly know him. He no longer seeks reputation. He seeks resonance, and in this seeking he trims his life of excess, prunes relationships that no longer bloom, and waters only what grows roots. He is not a fortress, he is a well, guarded not by stone, but by discernment, and those who drink from his presence do so not because it's convenient, but because it's rare. And so his small circle remains, not as a wall to keep the world out, but as a gate to let only the true ones in. A man who walks alone is not one who has failed to gather companions, but one who has succeeded in shedding illusions. The world often mistakes isolation for deficiency, but there is a sacred difference between being alone and being abandoned. The former is a choice, the latter is a wound. This man, the one with a small circle or none at all, has chosen sovereignty over noise. In the quiet, he has learned to breathe without mirrors. He no longer needs reflection from others to know that he exists. He has tasted life without constant reassurance, and in that solitude he has discovered that presence is not a performance. It is a return to essence, to origin, to the self unguarded. Security is not the absence of threat, it is the absence of dependence, and the man who can stand in a room with no one applauding, with no one nodding in agreement, and still feel whole, he is the freest among us. His freedom is not born from rebellion, but from release. He has let go of the need to be liked, to be seen, to be followed. There is no arrogance in his solitude. There is only elegance. He walks softly because he no longer needs to be loud. He listens because he no longer needs to be heard. He doesn't demand space. He occupies it with grace. The world may not notice him first, but when it does, it listens more carefully, because there is substance in his silence. He is not lonely, though the world may try to convince him he should be. He has chosen a different path, not because he couldn't walk with others, but because he wanted to see where his soul would go without distraction. And what he found was not emptiness, but clarity, not despair, but discernment. Most people are afraid of silence because it echoes, but he has befriended that echo. He has sat with it long enough to hear the truths it carries. He has faced the parts of himself that crowds allowed him to ignore. He has acknowledged the fears that applause once muted, and in doing so, he has cultivated strength from the inside out. Relationships, for him, are no longer decorative, they are deliberate. He doesn't surround himself for comfort, but for cultivation. He does not collect people like tokens. He invites few, but he invites deeply. Those who walk beside him are not ornaments to be displayed, but companions who understand the weight of his truth. He is not easily swayed. He is not easily impressed. The opinions of the world roll off him like rain on stone, not because he is cold, but because he has weathered storms within that were far louder than any voice outside. What remains is a man whose core cannot be shaken by popularity or abandoned by loneliness. In his solitude, he has built a fortress, not to keep the world out, but to keep his integrity in. He guards his peace like a sacred flame, knowing that one careless breath can extinguish what took years to ignite. He is gentle with his time, intentional with his words, and loyal to his values, even when no one is watching. This kind of man is rare because this kind of path is hard. It is easier to be liked than to be real, easier to be surrounded than to be centered, easier to entertain than to evolve. But he has chosen the difficult road, the one that forces the soul to grow, not through affirmation, but through alignment. He understands that maturity means being misunderstood, that depth often looks like distance, that not everyone is meant to go where he is going, And so he blesses those he lets go, honors the silence they leave behind, and continues walking, not forward for approval, but inward for truth. He has become a sanctuary unto himself, a resting place, a well that doesn't run dry when others leave. His peace is not conditional. His joy is not performative. He has made peace with his past, purpose in his present, and patience for his future. Alone but not adrift, quiet but not lost, secure not because he controls others, but because he knows himself, the man with a small circle lives on a different frequency. He no longer speaks just to fill silence. He no longer acts just to be seen. His life is an offering of precision. Every choice, every step, every relationship curated with care. He is not efficient, he is intentional, and in that intentionality he finds meaning others rush past. He does not crave the crowd's embrace. He has felt it before, and it was fleeting. What he seeks now is not warmth, but truth, not company, but communion, not numbers, but depth, and those who find their way to him feel that difference immediately. They do not meet a man, they meet a mirror, a stillness, a presence, left to prove, only something left to protect, and that something is himself.